Welcome to the Southeast Collaborative Online Conference. Uh, this project is made possible in part by a Library Services and Technology Act grant from the Institute of Museum and Library Services. And today we have Jean Thrift with her presentation about patrons and user research, and I will hand it over to her.
Thanks, Tiffany. Hi, I'm User Experience Librarian at Lander University in Greenwood, South Carolina. And I'll be talking to you about a few different user research methods that I've applied in my library. Two for your library's physical presence, feedback stations, and reply card studies. And then another two for researching your library's digital presence, card sorting studies, and usability testing. So if you're not familiar with the field of UX in the library, I'm just going to paraphrase the classic Nielsen and Norman definition of user experience, which is to say a library's user experience is a big umbrella that encompasses every point of the library that the end user touches: the building, the website, services, people, resources. And a truly excellent user experience requires two things: meeting the user's exact needs without difficulties, as well as a simplicity and elegance that make the library a joy to use. So I'll start with two methods you can use to research your library's physical presence: feedback stations and reply cards. Feedback stations are one of my personal favorites. This was my first major user research initiative I embarked on as a new UX librarian. It requires a small investment of equipment. You'll need question and comment forms. I like to have them printed up in a tear-off pad. I recommend using a suggestion box to collect them, an old-fashioned, like a box with a slot in the top and a lock. You could also just use like a basket or something. A large bulletin board and push pins, and a large whiteboard with dry erase markers and an eraser, and a camera just on your phone or tablet or anywhere to take photos of the whiteboard. I think the location that you choose to install the feedback station is a pretty important choice of making it a success. I would recommend a location in the library that affords the user some level of anonymity and privacy, as opposed to maybe installing it right in front of the front desk. We chose this printer area in a little alcove right off of our main lobby in the library. This is a really popular printing station where students kind of hang around waiting for their jobs to print, using the staplers and the hole punches. And it's a good spot to capture students who are hanging out and maybe thinking, maybe I'll sit here and read some of these comment card responses or write something on this whiteboard. I think the most important key to making the question and comment forms successful is posting their replies publicly and thereby engaging in a visible dialogue with the users. So you can see over in the bottom left corner, we have the suggestion box and the pad of forms where users can submit questions and comments and drop them in the box. I check the box every morning when I come in during the week, and we try to answer forms within a day or two as we're able, and then post the replies on the bulletin board. And with the volume and pace of forms we get, we're usually able to leave up responses for at least a week or two or even 3, plenty of time for the user to come back by and see the response to their question. When we first installed the station, we put up this fake sample card that was written by one of our student workers to just demonstrate how the whole system was supposed to work, kind of like putting a little bit of money in your own tip hat. And as far as analyzing the data that we get out of the forms, since this is an anonymous, free-form, ongoing feedback outlet, I don't do any formal statistical analysis or processing of this data, but I do keep a log in a spreadsheet of every form we receive and our response, because we found that over the years, we do kind of get the same questions and comments over and over about certain issues. And we've refined some standard response language to certain things over time. It's good to be able to see how you've responded to the same questions or comments in the past. And it's good for keeping myself honest. Like with qualitative feedback, some things can just stick in your mind and maybe seem like more prominent than they really are. So keeping the log is a good way to check myself when I, find myself thinking or telling people, oh, they ask for that printer on the top floor all the time, like that comes up all the time. It's good to be able to look back at the log and see, okay, by all the time, I mean, it came up 5 times. So that's good to have the data actually there. And on the right here is one of my favorite questions we've ever gotten. What would you change about the library if you could, besides your pay, LOL? So since we installed the station in late 2018, in the first month, we received 44 forms. And in the past few years, we've received more than 700 forms in total. And this chart gives you some broad idea of the types of questions and comments that we get through this outlet. So you can see that our biggest category, 19%, is just pure silliness. Memes, jokes, Taylor Swift song lyrics, what came first, chicken and the egg. I have a standard response I post for that. And we post those and reply to them as we're able. Some of the other library staff members help me respond to those. But I think having fun with it and encouraging the students to have fun with it is part of what keeps it being a really high interaction outlet. It's fun for the students to kind of get their 15 minutes of fame with having their joke posted. So we don't discourage that. Our next 2 categories, neck and neck, are comments about printing. Remember, we installed the station in a printing area, so I think it's safe to say that the location you choose for the station will skew the content of the feedback that you get. I'm sure we get a disproportionate amount of comments about printing because it's right next to a printer. And then we get a lot of appreciation, a lot of cards saying, thank you so much. You guys are awesome. I love using the library, which is pretty great. Who wouldn't want to come into work and read some comments like that from your users? We get a lot of comments about dining services, both our options in the library building and elsewhere on campus. A lot about our study rooms. That's one of our most popular services or resources we offer. And I'll talk more in the reply card section next. The first few months after we installed the station, we were getting a lot of comments about noise. So next to the bulletin board where I post the comment card responses, we have a whiteboard where we put up open-ended questions. And that can provide an outlet to seek some level of clarification on issues that you identify through the question and comment forms. Since it is an anonymous feedback outlet, there's limited ability to try to get clarification, but the whiteboard can be one place to do that. I recommend leaving each prompt up for 3 weeks to make sure that it gets a lot of different people interacting with it. I just take a photo of the board once every day. When it gets filled up with responses, I erase them to make room for more. And at the end of 3 weeks, I just compile a simple Word document report summarizing the responses that we received to the question. These are a couple examples. This was a prompt that we got a lot of really fun engagement with. What book display topics would you like to see? And over on the right is a report I compiled for a prompt about what other items would you like to be able to borrow from the library's front desk. And we ended up adding a lot of these items to our front desk reserves after we ran this prompt. We have phone chargers and laptop charger available now. We bought different, more fun dry erase marker colors. We borrowed some calculators from the math department and have those in reserve. That's a popular item now. We bought nicer staplers to put out at the print station. So we really pay a lot of attention to this feedback, and we make changes based on what we hear from the users. The last thing I'll say that I think is extremely important for a user research outlet like this is closing the loop and communicating back to the users what changes you made as a result of the feedback they shared. So we did this by, at the 1-year mark after we had installed the station, we designed a big poster reporting all of the different changes we had made and actions we'd taken in response to the feedback we'd received. And we kept that posted in the feedback station for a couple weeks. And it's continued to be an outlet that we get a ton of engagement with, and we still listen and make changes. So my second method I'll talk about for investigating your physical presence is doing a reply card study. So as I mentioned, in our first few months of installing the question comment whiteboard prompt station, we started getting a lot of comments and some whiteboard posts complaining about noise, that it was too loud in the library. A lot of really impassioned, very strongly worded complaints that people were being way too loud in the space and it was too loud to concentrate and study. And honestly, we were surprised and a little puzzled by these complaints. We were all kind of talking amongst ourselves and saying, you know, when we're here, it's pretty quiet in this library. Like, it's a big building and it's open a lot of hours. So I guess we're just not hearing it. It's happening at a time or in a place where we're not observing it, but we don't really know what they're talking about. Like, when and where is it so loud in here? So this was an opportunity we decided to investigate with a reply card study. And I think it's safe to say this is definitely the lowest cost user research method I'm going to cover. It only requires one thing, which is just a whole bunch of little pieces of paper, preferably with a bright color, so that you can spot them and the users can spot them. And I just had these printed up at our copy center here with a few simple questions. We put these out during the morning chair count. We would put them on seats throughout the building. And then the next morning, collect the ones that have been completed and replace them with blank ones. So we did this study over finals week in December. And over the course of 7 days, collected 93 completed cards. And to process the data, I entered the answers to these questions into a spreadsheet and processed them with calculating the average noise levels, like on that scale of 1 to 5 there, to basically just answer 4 questions. On average, when was it the loudest and where was it the loudest? And also, when and where was it the quietest? And we use that data to build on where was it already naturally the loudest in the building and the quietest. And we rearranged some furniture to help more organically zone the noise. Some couches that were noise generators and probably shouldn't have been in like a quiet study area, et cetera. And then we just installed a heck of a lot more signage. So we had a few very minimal noise zone signs in the building. I mean, literally like just black and white 8.5 by 11 pieces of paper on a few doorways saying, oh, you know, entering a quiet study area, but really no eye-catching definitive noise zones as far as our building signage. And we really turned that around. We zoned some clear areas as silent study area, quiet study area, and collaborative study area. And we put out these table tents explaining what area you were in, and if you didn't want to be in that kind of a noise zone, where you could go to either be louder or find more quiet. And especially in the area that we designated as the silent study area, we installed a bunch of posters and some really strong graphics of shushing, and put up a lot of door signs and made it very clear what area you were in and where you could go if you would prefer to be louder. And the signage and the furniture rearrangement seems to have really worked. Since we first installed the feedback station, our noise complaint comments have really plummeted. We had a little teeny uptick last semester of getting a few complaints, but the year before that, we were all the way down to 0, and we haven't gotten any so far this semester. The semester after we had installed the signage and rearranged the furniture, we even got some comment cards thanking us for making it so much quieter in the building. So it seemed to have been a successful initiative. These are a couple of articles that I drew really heavily on when I was designing my feedback station and reply card study. I would definitely recommend checking both of these out if you're interested in embarking on any kind of physical space assessment. The first one is an article from a few years ago in Weave, and the second one, written by librarian Peggy Porter in the 80s, is a great read. I'd recommend that even just as a pleasure read. That's a really fun article. So next I'll talk about 2 techniques for investigating your library's digital presence, your website or your discovery layer. And those are card sorting and usability testing. So first I'll talk about card sorting. This is a great method to inform the information architecture of your website. And at the time that I conducted a card sorting study here, this was what our top menu looked like on our library website. I think this had been in place for a good amount of time. And you can see it looks a little imbalanced, maybe. I think a lot of pages had gotten thrown under that services option over time. So we felt like it was time to check in and see whether this menu matched our users' mental model of how content should be grouped on our website. So you need a few inexpensive supplies to conduct this method. You'll need 30 to 40 index cards. We actually still had some blank catalog cards in our supplies, so I just used blank catalog cards myself. I would recommend using printed labels like Avery labels or from a label maker, as opposed to handwriting the labels on the cards. Post-it notes and a marker for your participants to use during the study. A big empty surface like a table to spread out the cards into groups. You'll need incentives to recruit at least 15 participants. I just use candy. And again, a camera just on your phone or a tablet or something to take photos of each completed card sort. So I recruited 17 participants. I would recommend 15 as a target. That's kind of the industry recommendation. I would probably do recruitment a little differently the next time I do a card sorting study. I think that I thought that just getting a Reese's cup would be more compelling than it was. I did manage to recruit 6 students and a faculty member just sitting out at a table in the library with some candy and a sign saying, you know, oh, do a fun card sorting activity and get a study snack. But I did end up having to flesh out my pool with using some of our student library workers and a couple library staff and emailing a couple of faculty members to ask if I could test them. So I would recommend, based on my experience, maybe offering a little bit of a juicier incentive and maybe pre-scheduling the sessions. I was claiming that they only took 10 minutes, but I would say really for a 40 card sort, it's more like about 20 minutes if the user's engaging with it thoughtfully. So for each study session, I explained to the participant what the purpose of the study was. So we were doing this to improve the library's website. And I explained these steps to them, that they were going to take 40 cards labeled with content items currently on our library website and sort them into any groups that made sense to them. And this method's called an open sort. A closed sort is when you've already also decided what the labels of each group would be. But in an open sort, after they've sorted the content items into any groups that make sense to them, they also come up with a name for the group and add a label for each one they create. And another important point is I asked the participants to use the think aloud method, which is pretty much exactly what it sounds like. They should be just thinking out loud and saying what's going through their head as they're trying to decide where to put each card. And every time they asked me what a card meant, I made a note of that. And at the end of this process, you get something that looks like this. Everybody's looks different though. It's interesting. So there's a lot of different approaches you can take to analyzing card sort data. If you are very well-versed in statistical analysis and have access to a program like SPSS, there's some different statistical approaches where you can analyze the data. I used a spreadsheet that was developed by Donna Spencer, a UX expert in Australia, that has a different approach, less statistical, to analyze open card sorts. She's really developed and refined that spreadsheet over the years, and she's made it available to be downloaded for free at her website. You can download the spreadsheet template and a PDF of instructions. And I found this a method that I was really comfortable with and found pretty valuable. So when I was making those notes, every time that a participant asked me what a card label meant, that was to identify what labels are we using on the website that are confusing and we should consider changing. And these 7 labels were ones that 6 or more of the participants asked me what they meant. You can see we had a web page called Library Liaison Program. A lot of participants asked about that and kept asking, is that for students or faculty? There was a page called Library Terms that was basically a glossary of library-related terminology. But it was interesting to realize a lot of participants assumed that was like terms and conditions or like a list of rules for using the library. So we changed the name of that to Library Lingo after we conducted this study. And there were a few pages that the participants just didn't really understand, like why would this need to be on the library website? So this is a comparison of, on the left is our top level navigation menu at the time of the study. And on the right are the top categories of content that our participants generated during the card sort. And you can see that there's not a ton of overlap here. The only 2 category names that are the same are a home category and a help category. So this was telling me that there was a mismatch between our users' mental model of how this information would be organized and the way that we had it organized in our current website information architecture. So I developed this proposal for a new information architecture for the website and presented it to the fellow library faculty in a meeting. I always, when I can, for stuff like this, try to develop a little short presentation like a PowerPoint and organize a meeting for the other faculty, as opposed to, I try to avoid just sending out a long report or starting a big email thread. I found that it's most effective to get everybody in a meeting and have everybody make time at the same time to look over the results of a study and discuss them and ask questions. And we implemented this new menu over the summer, the following summer. And this is still pretty much what our website menu looks like now. We've made a few tweaks to labels and added some new pages over the last couple of years, but we found that this is a pretty effective information architecture. So the last method I'm going to cover, another one for investigating your library's digital presence, is another one of my personal favorites, usability testing. So there's a lot of expensive, fancy equipment and software you can buy to do usability testing, but I would say all you really need is a computer with some form of screen recording software. I used Echo 360 and incentives to recruit 5 study participants. And I did offer a pretty nice incentive for this study. I used some campus bookstore gift cards, and I did pre-schedule the sessions for students and faculty members to come in. I recruited a few different ways. I asked for some student recommendations from the Tutoring Center and the SGA. I had also, during orientation, gotten some signups from freshmen who were interested in being contacted about usability testing opportunities. So I did a few different types of outreach to recruit our participants and get a good mix of different types of students. So the objective of our usability test was, we had just migrated to a new discovery layer, the Ex Libris product, Primo. All of the South Carolina college libraries had migrated to a shared system. And we wanted to investigate how effectively and efficiently users were able to use the new catalog and discovery layer, and how satisfied they felt with the new product. So I designed a test with a series of tasks to investigate whether participants could find sources available through the library, whether they could use Pascal Delivers, which is our rapid book delivery shared resource sharing service. Users can request to borrow books from other libraries in the state. Whether they could use the basic system functionality, email, save, delete, and whether they could view full text online where it was available through our databases through link resolvers. And then the post-session interview questions investigated whether this was actually a tool they saw themselves using and at what stage it would fit into their research process. So I used 5 participants, which is the classic usability testing recommendation. Sometimes people are surprised that that's a relatively small testing pool, but research has borne out that if you test more than 5 participants, beyond that number, you're not going to be discovering any more major problems with the system. Any major pain points in the system, you'll find out within 5 participants. I recruited from across a variety of our academic fields here at Lander. I used 1 faculty member and 4 students. And in the pre-session interview, I asked them questions about their research background. They self-identified their research proficiency on a range of expert to novice. 2 of the participants had used Primo before, 3 were freshmen who'd really never used any of the library's resources yet. All of them said that they typically use their personal laptop for research, and that was the device that we were doing the test on, a laptop. So during each test session, I asked the participant to inhabit a persona for the scenario tasks. I asked them to imagine that they were a freshman starting research, like the very early stages of starting research for an English 102 paper. And I conducted the testing in one of the conference rooms in the library. The participants completed the tasks on my laptop while I was recording the screen with Echo 360. And I scheduled an hour for the test, but the average session length was only about 44 minutes. So I started with the pre-session interview where I asked about their research background and research habits. Then we moved into the testing series of tasks where I asked them to perform tasks, imagining that they were the freshmen. And then I conducted a post-session interview asking what they thought about their experience using Primo, how satisfied they were with the sources they found, etc. So I made some notes during the tests on how test completion was going. And then I definitely did go back and watch through all of the recordings to identify pain points. And I basically, as far as how to analyze the data, scored each task on a scale of completed easily, completed with some difficulty, or totally failed to complete. And the tasks that emerged as pain points where there was a pretty high ratio of difficulty completing or failure to complete, I kept looking harder at those segments of the tests and trying to analyze what were the common threads, where what seemed to be the problem for users, and brainstorm some potential improvements we could make to help them be more efficient with those tasks or be able to complete them at all. So unlike the first three methods that I have talked about, this research study had a more limited ability to make improvements based on the results. I presented my study findings and some recommendations I had made with wireframes to the library faculty. And then for every recommendation that we approved to try to implement, my next step was I had to determine which category each change fell into, something that we would actually have the ability to customize ourselves in the system, or something we might be able to ask for support from the shared LSP team at Pascal for, or something that really would only be able to be changed by the system vendor Ex Libris. It would have to be a development consideration request. So a few examples I'll show you. One major pain point that I identified in the tests were finding books available through our resource sharing system Pascal delivers. Participants really struggled with this task. And this is an important function of our discovery layer. This is a great service we have to offer. So one thing that was clear was the participants were very distracted by this institution filter that was in the filter options on the left menu. When I asked them to find books available through other colleges, they really wanted to somehow make it work through using this filter menu, but it just wasn't helpful in any way. Even if, you know, a book was available at another college, it most often was also available here. Just because there's copies at other colleges doesn't mean there's not also a copy here at Lander. And also, it wasn't an efficient or logical way to look for other books on a topic. It doesn't really matter which institution it would be coming from. What matters is finding a book that's a good fit. So we decided to remove that filter from the options. It was really distracting and didn't seem to be accomplishing actually anything helpful that we could tell. So we were able to make that customization on our own. And then as far as actually finding an efficient way to find Pascal Delivers books, the way to do it was to choose that scope in a drop-down menu. And two of the participants finally found that after searching a really long time. One of the participants were never able to find the Pascal Delivers in the drop-down menu, and they failed the task and weren't able to do any of the follow-up tasks that built on that. So we recognized that it was really a problem that there was no mention of Pascal delivers anywhere visible in the discovery layer. You had to just remember that it was in that drop-down menu. And one of the kind of founding principles of usability is recognition over recall. You don't ask the user to remember where they once saw something or where they were once told to look for something. You put it in front of them where they can recognize it. So there was a top level menu that we had the ability to add links to and customize what links showed up. So we decided in this top menu to add a Pascal delivers link. So that was a good improvement that we were able to make on our own. Another change we made, just based purely on the qualitative feedback. Only one participant brought this up, but it just resonated with us so much that we were like, you know what, she's right. There's this filter option that had been, the default label was expand my results. And I like to ask a question in the post-session interview. If you had a magic wand you could wave, what would you change about the system? And participant 3, none of the tasks had involved this filter. It was just something over there that we hadn't thought a whole lot about yet. But she focused on that and said, you know, I don't know what that is. I have absolutely no idea what that is. And I just wish I knew what that was. And we were like, you know what, she's right. That label's really not imparting any meaningful information. It doesn't tell you how it's going to change your results or what it's going to add in to expand them. So we were able to customize that label ourselves and change it to include abstract only results, which is what it means and what it does. The default setting for Primo is to only include articles that are immediately available online in full text. But if you want to, you can add in some abstract only results from index databases. So that was an example of a change we made, not because all the participants were struggling or bringing it up, but it was just a really good point. So usability testing is not always a numbers game by any means either. Sometimes only one participant will bring something up, but it'll just be a good point. So the last example I'll share is one that we weren't able to make ourselves. It's something that would have to be changed by the vendor, by their development team. A major pain point that I identified in the tests were saving item records. So the way that Primo represents save is a push pin, a pin icon. And the participants on I had 3 different save tasks to kind of judge the learnability. And on the first task, the participants were really struggling with this. 2 of them kept looking for the word save spelled out as a label. One of them told me that she was looking for a folder icon. She was used to using like the EBSCOhost databases. And pretty much all of the participants kept searching over and over in these 2 menus. They kept mousing over those again and again, looking for a save option, and there wasn't one. The save pin is kind of weirdly off by itself over like in a far right top corner if you have a item record open. And then what was also interesting was participant 3 immediately found the save option, but up through the final save task, she wasn't confident that she was actually saving. The first time she pressed it immediately and said, well, I pinned it, but I don't know if that means saving it. And then she kept searching these 2 menus and saying, it's got to be somewhere, but I'm just not sure where it is. And then the second time that I asked her to save something, she said, I'm just going to do what I did earlier, but I don't know if I'm really saving it. And by the 3rd time, she just laughed and said, I just assume that's how you do it. So, like I said, this was an example of something that we were not able to customize the improvement ourselves, but in last year's Alma Primo enhancement voting, there was a ballot item to add a save option to like share save menu in the item record. And we cast our vote for that. And if we hadn't conducted this usability testing on our Primo instance, I don't think we would have even realized that that was an important development change to advocate for. So I just wanted to include this as an example to demonstrate, even with systems that you don't have total control over customizing and implementing changes to, it's still worth testing because sometimes it's playing the long game and advocating for the vendor to make development changes over time to a system you're going to be using for years. So if you do also happen to be a Primo library, Ex Libris, the vendor, actually has some really nice usability testing resources on their website. I did use my own test script that I had developed, but they provide a suggested text script for librarians on their website. And this page also has a link section to a lot of really good, just general online resources about usability testing. They have links to some of the classic Nielsen and Norman Group usability testing pages and stuff like that. So I would definitely recommend checking this page out if you are also a Primo user. So in closing, I think user research is super rewarding, both for the library and for its users. I find that there's really no replacement for asking the users what they think and feel. All of these methods have a strong qualitative element. There's popular methods of doing user research that's just quantitative or just observational, but they don't give you the insight into not only what the users are doing or asking, but what they're thinking and feeling about the whole process. And I think it's super meaningful to the users as well to know that efforts being made to listen to them and that concrete actions are being taken based on what they have to say. So I think this is really important and rewarding work to engage in your library. A couple of my personal favorite resources for finding out more about UX in libraries and different types of projects you can do are Weave. That's an open access peer-reviewed journal about library user experience. In full disclosure, I am on the editorial team, so of course I have to give them a shout out. And last year I had the opportunity to attend Designing for Digital. It was all virtual last year. I think normally it's held in Austin, Texas, but they have an archive available of their content. And I think they always have a virtual element to the conference as well. That was really inspiring, a great place to see projects that other librarians are working on for UX research and design in their libraries. I would really highly recommend that. And please get in touch with me if you have any questions about this presentation or other questions about how to do research, user research in your library. I love talking about user experience in libraries and would love to hear from you. Thank you.